Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Anthony Cosenza with the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We are coming at you as promised on this Friday live here on CincyJungle.com, on CincyJungle.com's Facebook page, and on our Orange and Black Insider YouTube channel. I know it's kind of a weird time for some of you. We thought on this Friday we'd catch those of you on the Eastern time zone, which probably is the majority of Bengals fans. We thought we'd catch you maybe on your lunch break or something like that. So we've got already a lot of questions that came our way over the past handful of days. So we're going to get to some of those. If you want to submit some questions to us, whether it's through the live Facebook feed, through our YouTube channel, or on CincyJungle.com through the comments, you can do that. We'll also take some calls and texts. Some of these that we have queued up are actually from voicemails and texts anyway, but if you want to give us a call during the live broadcast or shoot us a text, 949-542-6241, we'll be taking those. So, John, how you doing, bud? Twice in a week, dude. We get to talk some Bengals.
Twice in a week, Dr. Sheeran, Dr. Cosenza, ready to take your Bengals venting for another half hour. So let's get on with this.
Let's lay down on the couch and tell me about your problems, right? You've got more of the doctor look with the skeleton guy behind you, Randall. For those able to see the live video, you got more of the doctor, and you've got the collared shirt on. You got more of the buttoned up doctor vibe going. Than
all I need is a stethoscope, and I can be that fake doctor that tricked people a couple years ago.
Well, we're gonna try and play a little psychiatrist, I guess, for some of these Bengals fans, because unfortunately the Bengals are 0-4. Feelings are not great about the team right now, as evidenced by some of these questions we already have. So let's just tee it off. An email from Jason Dickerson, who lives in Germany, I believe. So this may be like nighttime for him. But he sent an email with quite a bit of thoughts, and really he kind of said, the crux of everything was how long of a leash should Zac Taylor have? I mean, it's only 4 games in, but we've seen already, I think, a bit of regression from the team last year under Marvin Lewis. Granted, the injuries are there and whatever, but, he kind of says 3 years, that's kind of the standard, I guess, especially with quarterbacks and coaches to get a proper evaluation. But I don't know if that's what the leash is. What do you think on Zac Taylor on that one?
I mean, this is the Bengals, and they're not going to rush to any decision unless there's just a fan outcry that they can't ignore. One thing I know about the Bengals and Zac Taylor and the relationship, when I talked to Emily Parker, who is the director of media relations with them, and just the differences between how they operate and how they communicate with Taylor compared to the final years of Lewis, it's basically night and day. Like, there's obviously a great relationship between Taylor and the front office, and I don't see just a bad start halfway through his first year getting in the way of that. I think there's obviously a precedent that has been set by Arizona now to fire just a rookie head coach and just move on to something else. And there's just no way that that's going to happen in Cincinnati. Like, this is the same ownership that held on to a head coach for 16 years with no playoff wins. There's no way that just one crappy start to 1 year is going to basically cut the leash off for Taylor. Now, when talking about beyond this year and maybe beyond, the next couple of years, I think, after year 3, if there's no progress, then there's the hot seat, I guess, starts heating up under Taylor. But I think who he is as a person and how they relate to him and that relationship going on, it's going to take a lot more than just straight losing seasons for them to basically cut ties with him. I would say year 3 or 4 is when we would start seeing the pressure really set in on Taylor.
Yeah, before you get to the next question here, I don't know if you're able, because of the the confidentiality and relationship you've built with their Bengals representative there. I mean, was there anything that you're able to share concrete in terms of example? You mentioned that Zac Taylor was, the communication level is different. I don't know if that means better. I don't know if that means more frequent. Whatever that means. I don't know if you have any inside information on that, if you're able to even share it, but I'd be interested to hear it.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of recency bias because I wasn't like old enough to really understand any of this when Marvin first came in. And I imagine when he first came in, when he was just a young head coach in himself, he was very similar to Taylor. But I think it's just about how, like, the final years of what Marvin Lewis was, and what that relationship basically dwindled down to be. Compare that to Taylor, who, just from what I've been told, is so much more open as a communicator and so much more open to trying new things, and just a more open relationship, I guess, and something that is a lot fresher than what they've experienced in the past, and just a breath of fresh air and a breath of fresh change. He brought a lot of change into a lot of new facilities into the building, a lot of different things that they did in the off season. It's just someone who is a lot easier to work with, and that's obviously coming with the age difference and whatnot. But still, at the end of the day, you need to produce as a coach, and I think they realized that this is not really his team yet. This is still a lot of the guys that Marvin brought in, and it's going to take some time for him to really implement what he's trying to bring with his own players. So the leash, I would say, is fairly longer than what other head coaches get at other organizations.
Yeah, and this team has been known to be a bit more patient than some other franchises in terms of knee-jerk reaction firings and all that good stuff. You want to go to the next one there, John?
Yeah, all right. This one was from a frequent listener of the show, Ken Dipple, via text. Is it already time to think about firing Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator? And what about Jack Del Rio? Well, they tried to hire Jack Del Rio, and that essentially didn't work out. So I don't understand why they would try to go back to him in the middle of the season after firing the defensive coordinator that they waited 50 days to hire. Anarumo is a guy that obviously Zac Taylor trusts, and a guy who was brought in because of his relationship with Zac Taylor. There's definitely still deficiencies with the scheme right now, but even with that said, it's a personnel issue. And for the fact of the matter is, this defense, from a personnel standpoint, didn't really change enough for any tangible improvements to happen on the defensive side of the ball. And yeah, they faced some tough offenses to start out the season, but at the end of the day, you got to produce. And this is like very similar to Taylor and the scheme that he has on the offense side. Anarumo's got to bring in his guys on the defensive side of the ball. And there's just not been enough positive roster turnover to see any real change. And yeah, like there was improvement last year when they moved on from Terrell Austin to Marvin Lewis. And I think that's because Marvin has been here longer, and those were his guys, and he was more comfortable and fitting those guys to where they succeed. But I don't think we're going to see a midseason firing with Anarumo either. I think just with the debacle of getting him in the first place and the struggles of finding a defensive coordinator in the offseason, I don't think there's anybody that they would trust to basically take over the reins on the team right now, to take over for Anarumo, just for how long that came together. Maybe they'll evaluate in the off season, but I think Anarumo is basically not necessarily tied to Taylor per se, but definitely has a longer leash than what Terrell Austin had, because they don't have a viable option on the roster to replace him with.
Yeah, this is what's been frustrating about this year is there are signs out there where you're going, okay, there it is. There's some positive. There's some, like week 1, right? I mean, the Bengals played pretty well. They gave up only 20 points to Seattle on their home field. Seattle scored at home against the Rams 30 points just last night, 31 points, something like that. So, I mean, there are signs that Anarumo has these guys, and Taylor too, to an extent, has them going in the right direction. And then once they do, then you have this 49ers game. You have this Steelers game. You look back to this Monday night game, not only was it 10-3 at the half, there were penalties that were not called. If you read cincyjungle.com, there was an offensive pass interference on the James Conner touchdown right before half that was not called. There was a penalty, if you saw on my Twitter, that I believe was in the first half. TJ Watt was part of a quarterback sack of Andy Dalton, was leading with his head and his elbow to Andy Dalton's head, and that was not called as a roughing the passer penalty. Even without those, it was a 10-3 game at half, and he had them in it. The offense wasn't doing anything. So, I mean, there are things where you kind of say, yeah, the tackling's been awful. You would hope for more big plays in terms of turnovers, but there are signs of this defense is adequate, I guess. But, as they get put in bad positions from the offense not moving the ball, and or, the offense moves backwards because of penalties and sacks, they're not put in the best positions. Obviously, those guys get fatigued, and there's been injuries on that side of the ball. So I'm not the biggest Lou Anarumo fan at this point, but I understand there have been some variables a little bit out of his control. And like you said, talent at certain spots is definitely an issue. Let's go with another text, Dan from Tennessee. I'm going to kind of lean on this one. I'm going to lean on you for this one. Why are the Bengals not running more 2 tight end sets? I know that, there's a certain personnel grouping that Taylor likes to run, which is a 1 tight end set. But, you sign CJ Uzomah to this big contract. He's been basically non-existent this year. You draft Drew Sample in the 2nd round. You bring back Tyler Eifert. You would think you've got a plan to use all these guys, some at the same time. They're not really doing that.
Yeah, and actually, to the person asking this question's point, their success rate in 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, compared to their success rate in 11 personnel, which is 1 tight end, is actually 12% more. They've only run 19 plays thus far this year in 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field, and they've succeeded on 53% of those plays. In 11 personnel, and I think they're still in the top 5 in terms of running 11 personnel, they're only succeeding at about a rate of 41%, which is about 5% lower than league average. So, yes, to your point, when you have a lot of injuries at the wide receiver position and your depth is dwindling there and your talent is dwindling there, and you still have a lot of depth at tight end, and you want to see what Drew Sample can do. You want to use Tyler Eifert more because you're preserving him because you're hurt he's going to get injured, and you sign CJ Uzomah to this contract. You want to get more of those guys onto the field to basically compensate for the lack of talent now that is at wide receivers. So you have guys like Damian Willis not in playing more snaps, and you're keeping perhaps your most talented receiver on the bench in Tyler Eifert. So I would prefer to see more 12 personnel. And this is something that Taylor told me and a couple other guys this offseason when we interviewed him. 11 personnel is really about what they use with the tight end, and 12 personnel is really about what they use with the tight end. There's ways you can get creative with that. So with your 11 personnel sets, you have 3 wide receivers and 1 inline tight end, but you can create 11 personnel opportunities with 12 personnel. You can use your tight ends in the slot, one of them in the slot, one of them out in the inline position, maybe one guy out wide. You can get more creative with the personnel that you have. And when you're more successful using 2 tight ends, I think that it would be smart to use more of that going forward. And also, maybe you keep one of them in for pass blocking, and hopefully not CJ Uzomah because he's one of the worst pass blocking tight ends in the NFL right now. But anything you can do to help the pass protection and any way you can get more creative with the talent that you have, I would be all for that. So I would definitely sanction that movement right there.
So before we move on to some, another question you may have for us, John, I'm seeing some stuff in Facebook. I have not, they're asking what's going on with Joe Mixon. Does he want out? Someone said either on Instagram or Facebook or something, he put peace, meaning like people are taking it like he's leaving. I have not seen that. Still a little early on my side of the country, so I've not seen some of that stuff, but I don't know any long-term worries. I mean, this franchise has a history of some of its best players, especially skill position players, getting disgruntled with the losing and contracts and all kinds of different stuff.
To be fair, like there's a lot of stuff going on around the NFL right now with players, not liking their situations, whatnot, and I'm completely for them, wanting a better situation and wanting out of what could be a toxic relationship with the team. We don't really see that much often with the Bengals, and we haven't seen that with Joe Mixon yet. In terms of his words with the media, he's been taking full responsibility for the lack of success in the run game, and I believe the tweet that's being referenced here is he just put up a deuces sign, and that was it. I think he put it on his Instagram story too. And I don't know if you've ever seen like athletes just post like the eye emoji, and like whenever there's like a trade rumor going on, and I think 90% of the time it's basically to troll us, and 10% of the time there's any weight to it. With that, I'd always take it with a grain of salt, and nothing that I've seen or heard from Mixon up to this point would indicate that he's the type of guy that would hash out those emotions on social media like that, even though he's been a proponent and urging the Bengals to do things over social media. But I think until we see something more concrete, there's nothing really to worry about with that.
Yeah. And I mean, if you've heard interviews and seen him on the, I mean, I remember last year, the Falcons game when AJ Green caught that game winning touchdown, he just had a knee procedure done. He's sprinting down the sideline and celebrating with AJ. And obviously when he, he expressed some frustration this year when the fans were booing, and he also said, I haven't been doing holding up my end of the bargain, but I think we all know that's primarily an offensive line issue. What else you got for us, John?
Let's see here. We got Chris W. in the live comment section, basically asking about Wren. What is Wren doing? Is Wren a bust, or is he just going to take him a while? You were a big Wren fan coming out of the draft. I know he was one of your favorite picks, but for him being 23 years old, for him being as great of an athlete he's still a raw player, and yeah, he is going to take some time. And unfortunately for him, well, this is kind of a two-way street here because the Bengals have been obviously playing a lot more 5-2 or 3-4, if you want to say, base sets to basically stop the run and account for the lack of linebacker depth. And with that, Wren has been playing a lot of what is known as the 3-4 defensive end, like a 5 technique, basically a B-gap player, and basically 2-gapping as a run defender. And because of the lack of depth that they now have at defensive end, he's been playing also more on the edge, more than so in inside. So I think right now, he's just kind of playing out of position a little bit. And for a player that still really doesn't know how to use his hands and maybe still being lost on some assignments, it's basically a snowball effect of bad things going against him. And his snaps have increased because, they haven't had Kerry Wynn, they haven't had Ryan Glasgow, they haven't had Carl Lawson for the past couple of weeks. So we've seen more Wren. And unfortunately, he's been getting exposed a lot of times in run defense. He's made some good plays, but the bad plays have outweighed the good ones. And, he just doesn't really know what to do yet. And I would prefer drafting guys who do have a sense of what they know what to do with their hands and do have a sense of what they know what to do on the football field. But he was always going to take some time, and you would like to see those mistakes, as early as possible to get him out of the way. But he's just not exactly ready yet to be a dominant player that his athleticism says that he can be.
Yeah, and, the hope is he's a project player that turns into a stud. The worry is that he's an athlete and not a football player, right? And he can't develop these skills. So, it's still very, very early for him, but he's kind of a microcosm of this entire draft class. This draft class, the first draft class of Zac Taylor's tenure, needed to have guys that were immediate impact players. Now, he can't help what happened with Jonah Williams, and he was set to be potentially an immediate impact player. But I've said this a couple of times. You basically had to go 6 picks deep to find a guy who is starting and or having a major role, and that's Michael Jordan. You had to go to all the way in their 3rd pick of the 4th round to find a guy in this draft that's doing that because of injuries, because of their inability to crack the lineup and all of that. So that is worrisome. And that is with the Bengals telling us that they are going to, their plan was, we think we can win now despite the coaching change if guys stay healthy and we add some pieces. If you really thought that, you needed to have a draft class to have guys immediately impact your team, and they have not done that. And the one guy, Michael Jordan, who has been starting, has not been playing very well. So it just is it shows a cycle of problems. There are a couple of comments too, both on Twitter and on our Facebook Live. We can't really talk about it too much. It's talking about, this team basically went to hell when they let Whitworth and Zeitler go. We know. They're not wrong in bringing that up, but there's been a couple people talking about that. Here's one from Twitter. Ryan Kaufman asks, how much can we say, I'm assuming meaning the problems in the 0-4 start, how much can we actually say is personnel? How much of it is coaching? I had high hopes for Zac, but getting worried that he has bit off more than he could chew as a head coach.
That's completely fair. I think this is mostly personnel issues because, like we talked about, there wasn't that much roster turnover this offseason. The turnover was mainly with the coaching staff, and a lot of trust and a lot of faith from the front office and the fans was, how can this coaching staff elevate a roster that is underwhelmed for the past 3 years? Well, at the end of the day, talent pretty much matters more than scheme. And it like Zac Taylor is not Bill Belichick. He's not any innovative head coach because he's very inexperienced. And this is an inexperienced coaching staff around Taylor. And unfortunately, there's just a lack of talent all throughout the roster with the exception of maybe a couple of position groups. And the injuries haven't helped. Obviously, there's a lot of core players that aren't playing right now. And they've done a poor job of replacing those core players with depth players that they found off the street, and a lack of scouting department will end up doing that. But yeah, I would say this is definitely more of a personnel issue. And it's not going to get better until they get better personnel. And hopefully they can build a proper scheme around better personnel that ends up to be a better product. But it's hard to basically shine crappy turds.
Yeah, I mean, my fear with I think that the Bengals' hope and fans' hope is that, yeah, they've got this next McVay guy, a guy that can turn around a team pretty much right away, get him to deep into the playoffs and kind of be this offensive guru guy. My worry, I guess, just being the cynical Bengals guy that I am, my worry is that, it doesn't work out for Taylor in Cincinnati. He gets let go, and then a couple years later, he lands somewhere else, and all of a sudden, because he's accrued experience with the Bengals, because he has landed in an organization that is more run like a proper business instead of a mom and pop shop, he's more set up to succeed, basically. He does well, like a Pete Carroll, like a Bill Belichick. These first couple of chances, it didn't work out, and then all of a sudden he turns into this guy, his second or third chance down the road, and it didn't work out with the Bengals. Like I said, maybe that's just cynical. And again, we're only 4 games into the Zac Taylor regime, but it's just a worry I have. You got any others, John?
Yeah, let's see here. Did Ken Evans asked, did Billy Price play better at guard than Michael Jordan? Well, in the Buffalo game, I think Price played fairly well. It wasn't definitely a liability on that line, and that was a better game for the offensive line than they played against Pittsburgh. I think right now it's just the offensive line coach, Jim Turner, and Zac Taylor to an extent doubling down on their commitment of Michael Jordan. That's the guy that they drafted. That's the guy that they scouted. That's the guy that they brought in and wanted to start. They thought that he earned that starting job in the preseason and in training camp when John Jerry faltered at that position. But I think the reality is right now Jordan's just not ready to start. A lot like Randall Wren is the guy that he's a great athlete at the position, but he just doesn't have any functionality to his game right now. And opposing players are going to exploit that, and especially against defensive lines like Buffalo, like Pittsburgh, who had interior rushers who were not only athletes but great technicians who could just get under his pad level. And right now, like the worst thing that Jordan has going for him right now is that he's 6'6", and he doesn't play with any ounce of leverage. And guys can just get under him and basically raise him up. And until he learns to play with a lower pad level, he's going to have struggles there. Billy Price will always obviously have his faults in this game because of his physical limitations, him having short arms and being really aggressive in his sets. But right now he's more prepared to start and play at a consistent level than Jordan. And I think the Pittsburgh game proved that. And their undying commitment to Jordan is very confusing to me. But I also understand it from the perspective that that's a guy that they brought in, and they're just stubborn into that fact.
Yeah. There are a number of texts and stuff coming through. We'll try and get to one or two more here. We're running a little long, but in case you are just joining us, I'm Anthony Cosenza. He's John Sheeran. We are part of the Orange and Black Insider podcast crew, and we're doing some live questions to kick off your weekend here on this Friday afternoon. So thanks for joining us live, and thanks for downloading it after the fact. If you were unable to join us live, it was kind of we teased it on Wednesday, but it was a little impromptu in terms of when we kind of hit the air on Friday. So thanks for joining us. If you want to get proper notifications, aside from following us on Twitter at Bengals OBI and reading cincyjungle.com for the posts, subscribe to our channels and you'll get notifications of when our content comes out, when we're going live on our YouTube channel and all of that. The places where you can subscribe. Obviously, YouTube, I mentioned our stuff's on cincyjungle.com, and then iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone. Our stuff is there, and you could subscribe to one of those channels wherever you get your podcasts. There have been a couple of different text messages coming our way, John. One is, unfortunately, we kind of addressed a little bit with the Zac Taylor and coaching. I just wanted to acknowledge Danny from London is listening, so that's pretty cool. We've got someone across the pond. Hope Danny's going to that game, the Bengals-Rams game, because it's not in Los Angeles, so I'm not going.
It's a weekly thing.
Yeah, there was one here. Saw a poll on Twitter. If the Bengals were sitting at number 1 and the Dolphins want to move up to take Tua, would you take their 2 top 10 picks and Josh Rosen? Also, keep up the good work. So two top 10 picks and Josh Rosen for the number 1. If the Bengals were to have the number 1 pick, would you do that?
I have no idea. I don't know 10 players in this in this next draft class that they could pick. I'll just say this right now. Like for the next however many months before we actually know who's in this draft class, besides like Chase Young and like Jerry Jeudy, the wide receiver from Alabama, if the Bengals are drafting in the top 5, it's mainly because their quarterback play has been shoddy. And if there is a quarterback worthy of that pick, not just a Christian Ponder, not just a Blaine Gabbert, a guy who just gets overhyped and is projected to go there, if there is a quarterback who is deserving of a top 5 pick and the Bengals are in the top 5, I would suggest the Bengals take that quarterback. I don't know for a fact that there are going to be enough quarterbacks for them to take if they don't get the first overall pick. I don't know if there's enough generational talent for them to pass on a quarterback and take 2 other players in the top 10. But if they have the opportunity to get the franchise quarterback who's worthy of that pick, I would advise them to take that. At this point, I'm not 100% sure right now because it's the 4th of October and there's so much more college football to be played. But as of right now, that's where I'm going to stand, and that's the statement I'm going to have for the next about 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult not only because we don't have the crystal ball, but it's difficult because you go back to the Ricky Williams trade that the Bengals did not make. And then they drafted who they wanted as their quarterback. And that whole thing just set this franchise back for years. So you look at that and you can kind of, weigh the options there. I like Justin Herbert more than Tua. So, I mean, I guess if you're able to move back and still get Herbert while the Dolphins may take Tua or something like that, then I would do that. I mean, both seem very promising. I just think that Herbert does more with less around him in terms of talent than Tua does because Alabama's Alabama. But, there are people who think Tua is much better than Herbert, and I understand that too. So, it's it's a hard one to say. I would maybe say yes, depending on, where those picks are and what all that kind of stuff. But, and, you're also talking about getting Rosen. He's this kind of guy, a roller coaster himself. So and who knows how he's going to react in terms of being on 3 teams in 3 years. Big ifs there. I don't really see it happening, and I don't see the Bengals having the number 1 overall pick anyway, but we'll see. Any others we want to get to before we get out of here, John?
Yeah, I'm just not looking forward to these. Don't waste a pick on a quarterback when they need to draft offensive line. I'm not looking forward to that debate. Let's see here. Why is Andre Smith here? Because they have 2 scouts, and they knew Andre Smith's name, and they didn't want to sign Donald Penn because they haven't worked with Donald Penn before. A lot of familiarity, a lot of that going on in the Bengals scouting report. Anything else? No, that just about does it.
Yeah. I mean, there are plenty others that there was a long one too, a really well thought out. Fortunately, it was a little long to get to on the air, but it was from Todd in Scranton, PA. Todd in Scranton. Long. We'll maybe try and get that on the next episode or something. He's obviously a fan of The Office, but he's deep in Pittsburgh, in Steelers territory, he said, and he's a Bengals fan. So I don't envy him on that front. But thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you for submitting all of your questions. We tried to get as many as we could on the different platforms we're juggling and simulcasting on. Appreciate you joining us. Enjoy your weekend. Be sure to subscribe to our channels: YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, Megaphone, all that good stuff. Keep it to cincyjungle.com for all of the breaking news, opinions, analysis, injury news, all that good stuff. And, of course, we'll be back on Sunday for post-game reactions as the Bengals take on the Cardinals to see who gets their first win. Yay, in Week 5. Thanks, John. Have a good weekend, bud.
You too, man.
All right.